I think when you try to stay disciplined, it's a kiss of death. This is Wendy Yellen, and this is the Art of Transformation. Before we continue, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps us reach other people like you who really want to make a shift, and I so appreciate it. Thank you. So why do I say it's a kiss of death? Because there's so much research on how we have a limited amount of self-discipline and we use it up by a certain time and all of that. But even without the research, you know, if you're like 99.999% of the world, that you already know that you can only continue staying disciplined for a certain amount of time, and then you let it go. Probably you've had an experience where you've pulled yourself up by your bootstraps. You said, I'm gonna do this. You went ahead and did it. Maybe it was a diet or a fast or some sort of challenge to yourself or some sort of tidying up or decluttering or exercise regime or journaling every day or whatever. And you probably have you've probably had some success with that, and also a feeling of never again. Like to make yourself get back into that I'm going to force myself until I do it mode takes an enormous amount of energy. And so many times when people say, they say, well, I didn't do this because I just don't have enough discipline. Well, I think, whenever I see that, I always think that the problem is that the person believes they have to have discipline in order to do it. And the focus on the discipline is part of what makes them want to go running and screaming in the other direction. Does that hit home for you? Have you ever forced yourself or tried to force yourself through discipline to make something happen and then had a much harder time of it in the future? Now, I'm not talking about where you have some reluctance and you get yourself to do it and then it feels like so much fun and you're so excited, and of course you realize how much worse it was in your mind before and how much easier it was once you actually got down to it. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when we really, really, really feel like we're forcing ourselves. So part of what you're encountering in your mind is you're making it harder already by seeing it as discipline and staying disciplined. Even just as I'm talking about it, I feel like, no, you're not going to make me do that. The rebellious part of me feels rebellious. All right, so it also implies that as people, as human beings, in order to do the things that we say we want to do and that we know are good for us, there has to be forcing involved. Now, you don't really see that in nature very much. Maybe you'll see some adult animals pushing their puppies or their babies a little bit, but the way I'm talking about it, I don't see that in nature. Do you? So what is it that the human being thinks is supposed to happen in themselves? What do we think is supposed to happen in us? And what are we assuming we don't have? You see, it's those assumptions that I think are incorrect. I think we're making assumptions that the discipline is the only way to get something done because of our past experience in life. So that past experience may be someone being really mean to us in a particular area. So, for example, when I was a kid, and I'm telling you these stories so that in case there's something that you can relate to about it, So as I tell you the story, see how you relate. When I was a child, I was overweight, and I hated clothes shopping. My mother was gorgeous and liked shopping enough. Certainly wasn't a terrible thing for her or a burden. But taking me was a burden, that's for sure. And one day I went shopping with her, and I didn't hang up all the clothes that I tried on. And she shamed me hugely in front of the salesperson. I don't remember how she shamed me. I just remember the feeling of being told I was wrong and bad, and what I did was terrible, and I wasn't being thoughtful of the salesperson, and how could I do that? And here I already couldn't stand looking in the mirror at myself. Nothing, of course, looked good on me. That was in my mind. And now I felt ashamed. And to this day, I hang up every single piece of clothing, even no matter what, when I'm trying on clothes, no matter what. Even if the salesperson says, oh, just give that to me, I have to do it because that's strong in my mind. So the way that I learned that I wasn't being considerate, if you could call it that, which I think was partly what my mother was wanting me to understand, came through in such a harsh way that it is now, I can still remember it even when I go shopping now, and I don't have that same terrible experience anymore. We have these layers of memories of shame, of a difficult situation, maybe something a little bit traumatic. That was a little bit traumatic, or terribly traumatic. And those memories and the way we see ourselves and the way others saw us and the way others treat us, they make us feel a certain way about ourselves. So a child who was always thought to be imperfect, always falling short, always getting criticized, never really being seen for who they are, but for who they were not, then it's very, very hard for that grown-up child, now adult, to feel competent and to feel like they can get things done in a good way. My brother is quite smart, and also a lot of his skill is around using his hands. My sister and I were more book smart, and so he's the youngest, so he came up being compared to both of us. Now, his skills, he's definitely intelligent, quite intelligent, and his skills were in a different direction. But he has all of those memories of being compared to us and completely falling short in his mind. And I think he's right. I think that my parents expected certain kind of success from him because of the success that my sister and I had. So they didn't see him for who he was, or they didn't see him as well as they could have, especially my father. So for my brother to think about learning something from a book, let's say, would be very, could be quite stressful, perhaps. I'm just guessing here, but I'm using him as an example. When someone grows up like that, let's put it this way, it can be quite stressful for them then to excel in the area that they were told they were bad in. Of course, right? But then how does the person compensate for it? So then they think they have to do something unnatural, like be disciplined. And that's, I think, a complete misunderstanding of how we actually get motivated. Now, a lot of people want to know how to stay disciplined. And again, when I hear that, I shudder, because it implies that there is no natural movement towards doing things inside of us. And that's just so not true. The natural movement towards doing things is inside of us, but it gets drummed out of us by some of the experiences that I mentioned below, like with my brother and like with the shopping experience. So take a moment and in a moment pause the recording, and I'd love you to put down a couple things that you've always assumed to be true about yourself, about what is needed to be pulled out of you for you to succeed in X area. Give it some thought, some real thought. What are your assumptions? And then maybe what you could do is compare those assumptions to what you think one of your successful friends or colleagues would have to do. And you might very well see, as you compare the two, that maybe there's some misunderstanding or some assumptions about something that's lacking in you. Now, if we were working together with Eidetics, then we would go back into some of these places and release some of the pent-up sense of self that's hiding behind or buried beneath your version of being shamed by not hanging up the clothes in the shop. Oftentimes, that's what I discover with myself when I'm doing, when I'm working with Eidetics and with my clients, is it's really what Dr. Asen, the father of Eidetics, used to call the crust, buried beneath the crust of your history. So, who are you really? What were and are my brother's strengths? And what can happen when someone really sees them in him? And especially when he's able to really feel and appreciate them in him. What happens when the part of me that got so defeated and shamed, what happens when I can viscerally feel the way that I was shamed, but also what the energy of me that was receiving that shame and taking in those lessons and then was crushed or buried beneath that. Those are the important parts of us as human beings. The part of the child that didn't get seen by the parent who was overwhelmed with sadness and trauma and maybe death and stress. So when a parent feels like that, it's very hard for the child to be seen, and often a child will feel, I can never be good enough because I can't even make my mother smile. She doesn't even smile when she sees me. Now that's what the child thinks. The child doesn't realize that the mother is suffering from some other reason. And so the child takes that in as something about herself. And then the I'm not good enough translates into, so I have to beat myself into a pulp in order to get anything done, because after all, I never stick with anything. I don't get the things done I say I want to, so I might as well just go to bed. I want you to notice, please, for yourself, how you can relate to any of these stories, and do a little thinking about how the way you understand yourself and who you understand yourself to be also forms your ideas about how you have to whip yourself into shape in order to get something done. Because I will pretty much guarantee you that they're very related and that your ideas about what you have to do to get something done are skewed and are not serving you right now. With Eidetics, we would work with this, but for the purposes of this recording, I want you to take some time, if this interests you, and see if you, a little bit of exploration, at least to find some of the holes in your understanding of yourself. Now, I know you want more than that. If you want more than that, and you're someone who's chomping at the bit to get more than that, then you and I should talk. It's really easy. You go to measiwanttobe.com, the link is here, and do a video virtual Eidetic experience. Talk to me in the application about what you're wanting. Very simple. And there's a scheduling there. You'll schedule yourself for a time with me. It's complimentary. And together, I'll look at your Eidetic experience and what you want, and I'll present a plan to you based on what you're telling me about where I think you could go and what could happen for you based on my 40 plus years of experience of working with people. So if that appeals to you, again, click on the link. measiwanttobe.com is where you can go. And I'll see you on the next recording.